Start your day with Morning Edition and wind it down with All Things Considered, only on KPBS. From global headlines to local stories, stay informed, inspired, and connected. Tune in daily or listen anytime at kpbs.org.
Welcome in San Diego, it's Jade Hindman. On today's show, a new book explores how Indigenous communities use basketball and skateboarding for cultural expression. This is KPBS Midday Edition, connecting our communities through conversation. Basketball and skateboarding are powerful tools for building community across cultures. But for Indigenous communities, these sports provide a unique avenue for cultural expression and mentorship. My next guest has a new book all about that. His name is David Camper. He's a professor of American Indian Studies and associate director of the Center for Skateboarding, Action Sports, and Social Change at San Diego State University. His new book is called Rezballers and Skate Elders, Joyful Futures in Indian Country. Professor, welcome to Midday Edition.
Thank you so much for having me, Jade.
So glad to have you here. So where did you get the inspiration for this book?
Well, I've been a lifelong basketball fan, and I grew up in Orange County in the 80s as a surfer and somewhat skater, and it's sort of impossible to avoid that culture growing up then. And I've been a professor for American Indian Studies for 20 plus years and doing research in Indian country for just as long. And my first book was about something completely different. It was about tribal labor relations and unions in tribal communities. And when I spent a lot of time, particularly at the Navajo Nation, talking with folks for this book, a lot of the casual conversations ended up going towards sports and basketball. And my eyes were completely open about how huge, particularly high school age basketball was at Navajo, and I began to learn at many other communities as well. And then the skateboard part was a bit by accident. One of my two of my students in a class that I taught on American Indians through film and television, I let the students make their own film, and they made a film about a pool on the Paula Reservation that was a little kind of underground spot where a lot of both native skaters and some of the most famous skaters in San Diego would skate. And it also opened up a whole new world. And this is, kind of what you call the post-tenure book, where you get to have a little bit more fun with the book. And so that's kind of what drew me to it.
Well, so tell me, how far back do we see basketball or rezball and skating show up in tribal culture?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the kind of points of my book is that, we often think of these sports as connect them with different communities, right? Basketball, particularly with African-American communities, and skateboarding. I think now we recognize its global reach, but it's often thought of as a Southern California kind of white suburban kid thing. But Native people have been participating in both these activities since the beginning. Basketball starts essentially with James Naismith in 1891. He's looking for a sport to do indoors. And something, at this time period in the kind of history of sports are thought of as this kind of development of a modern human being, and physical fitness is thought of as key. And this is also the time when American Indians are being forced to go to boarding schools. And these boarding schools are used as spaces to try to make Native people modern and civilized, and sport is a key part of that. So Native folks have been playing basketball from the really very beginning, the 1890s. And then, the skateboarding that we have today, I would argue, comes out of the 1970s, mostly kind of what we now know as the Dogtown crew, but it comes out of Venice Beach, and it's the kind of more aggressive style, less like a hobby. And there's evidence of Native people skating and picking this up in the late 70s and early 80s, so they really have been kind of participating from the beginning.
Wow. Well, what were some of the main takeaways you got from doing this research? I mean, how does it fit into your broader work
Sure.
as a professor of American Indian Studies?
Yeah. I mean, in general, with all my work, I kind of want to look at how the American public constructs a perception of Indianness, and then how American Indians see themselves vis-a-vis and or independent of that popular conception. So in this context, I'm doing it with basketball and skateboarding. And one of the things that American Indian scholars have talked a lot about in the last 10 to 15 years is really the importance of thinking of reservation spaces as not just damage-based or not just places of desolation, but also really key moments of hope and joy. And that's, I think, what basketball and skateboarding provide. They have these venues, for hope and joy. And so I've been lucky enough to just sort of travel around Indian country and witness this and see this like really profound, beautiful moments of like joy and really simple day-to-day levels.
Well, like you said earlier, this research has really taken you to some interesting places with interesting people. Mm-hmm. Any voices or stories you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, many. When I think about what I was just saying about, the book, the title of the book includes what I call Skate Elders, which is a sort of imperfect term that I've come up with that thankfully these skaters who I've identified them this way are happy with it and are okay with it. But it's taking the idea of mentorship, intergenerational mentorship that is key to any community, but particularly in Indigenous communities. And it tends to happen in a way where you have somebody other than your immediate parent kind of guide you through a skill a little bit. Then you go spend time on yourself and work on this skill. And then you come back and illustrate, what you've learned and making yourself a part of community. So there's one particular skater I work with, a guy named Dustin Craig, who's half Navajo and half a White Mountain Apache. And Dustin kind of like had this amazing realization when he was sort of skating and had these younger guys skating that he said, he's Apache, and Apache have this notion of what they call raiding culture, which is essentially like you would go out on a party and steal stuff from people. The raiding culture generally happened. You were training for this as like a 13-year-old boy. And he observed that like the skills you needed to raid would be having like agile body, quick, really sort of wiring. And he's like, wait, that's what makes a good skater too. Mm-hmm. And these raiders would kind of go off and learn sets of skills and come back and then be able to participate in what he calls a war party. His skateboard company is called Four Wheel War Pony, which is this idea of oftentimes you were raiding for horses and stealing horses. So he has like fully incorporated this notion in using skateboarding as an avenue to mentor skill set, to mentor discipline, self-reliance in the same way 100, 200 years ago these Apache youth would. And so then he uses the art of the deck to kind of teach these kinds of things to a sort of younger generation coming up. There's another amazing skater named Todd Harder who would put Native history on decks. He had this deck, for example, that was a collage of images and graffiti from the 1969 occupation of Alcatraz, sort of the height of the Red Power movement and Native civil rights activism. And he'd show up at powwows like with this deck, and he'd have kids come up and say, oh, that's really cool. What is that? And he's like, do you know about Alcatraz? And he say, no. He goes, go learn something about it and come back, I'll give it to you free. And he would get kids to like engage in their own, Native history. And get excited about it, and then he'd give them the deck. So it's using things that youth are already interested in, and combining it to foster culture.
Yeah. Well, what was your approach to highlighting joy and community that's ever present in tribal communities?
Yeah. I think one of the things about the way basketball is played and expressed in Indian country in particular is, one, it's just meant to be played at a really fast pace. So Native people call it Rezball. I think you can make a good argument. It's not terribly different than the way basketball is played other places, but what matters is they see it as their own thing. And Rezball is often played for the community. I think there's a common narrative, whether it's true or not, that basketball is used as a ticket out of a community. I think that's a prominent narrative in African American communities. I'm not actually convinced that's totally true, but nonetheless, this kind of ticket out narrative is not found really very much at all in Native communities. Like, you are playing for the community. You are playing to kind of like be with people and celebrate people. I argue that basketball is sort of a new version of powwows, and powwows are a 20th century intertribal event that celebrates culture and brings people together and enjoy, and people travel to all different powwows. Well, there are these basketball tournaments that are all over different reservations, and people go and play. And, one week you may play with another team, another week you might grab another guy on. And I've had people tell me about, these tournaments are also opportunities for people in the stands to get together and hang out and see relatives they might not have seen in a while. I have a chapter where I use the phrase anti-funeral. I call basketball an anti-funeral because a couple people have mentioned to me that, sometimes it's only funerals where we see all these family members. And, if it weren't for basketball, that might be the only time. To me, it's this like really beautiful kind of contrast. Mm-hmm. The last thing I'll add about that, too, is that a lot of Native authors incorporate basketball into their fiction and poetry and really use it as this contrast or as this kind of one in the same piece of despair and joy at the same time. You have these beautiful poems and stories about these people that kind of just want to play basketball but are also kind of just surviving, and basketball kind of like represents a little bit of that hope, in this complicated, context brought by settler colonialism.
Well, I also want to talk about your work with the Center for Skateboarding, Action Sports, and Social Change. Any projects that you're looking forward to?
Thank you for asking about that. So, we are. I spent time traveling to a bunch of tribal skate parks. Probably been to over 15 of them, and there's probably twice that many. And we have at our center, we work in collaboration with the Skate Park Project. And one of the goals of the Skate Park Project, the formerly Tony Hawk Foundation, has been to build and help people build skate parks all over. Mm-hmm. And a kind of small interesting thing is that usually the way their project worked was not that we'll build the park for you, but we'll give you the toolkit of how to lobby your local governments, how to raise money, et cetera. But recently, the Skate Park Project completely covered the cost of 2 skate parks and 2 only. One in honor of Tyree Nichols, the black skater that was murdered by police, and the other on the Navajo Nation reservation, which is really cool for me to kind of see this community I've worked with forever be acknowledged that way. But now there's this acknowledgement that maybe we don't need something as big as a skate park. Maybe and maybe we need to like work on getting skaters back into kind of accepted in the community. So there's this great movement in a lot of European cities and some in the global South called skatable sculptures. Mm-hmm. And the idea is you create the sculpture that can both be skated, it can be lounged on, it's art, etc., as a way to like incorporate skaters back into communities rather than saying you can't skate here, you can't there. So with my colleague, Dr. Naftali Williams, we've been working on this, and we're working to try to get a skatable sculpture, a little what we call an urban mobility lab on campus, to kind of look and see how this might play out, and then can we scale it to other places, actually do it in the city. So we're working on that, and then the Center for Skateboarding and Action Sports and Social Change is part of a larger collaboration that we also have at San Diego State called the Surf Skate Studies Collaboration. And this collaboration hosts a conference every couple of years. And we're, in October, going to host our third conference that has people from 10 to 15 different countries come and talk about the importance of surfing and skateboarding and on people's life, and all different areas like ecological protection, inclusivity, et cetera.
Yeah. When you say skatable sculptures, first thing comes to mind is pedestrians. How do those two things mix? What are the logistics there?
Yeah, I mean, so that is part of what is important to kind of figure out, and it really puts a lot of the onus and responsibility on skaters, saying like, hey, you should be a responsible citizen as well and kind of be aware of what's going on around you. I mean, skaters are really acutely aware of built environment, always have been, One of the things I love so much about hanging out with a skater is like they experience the world differently. They're like, oh, that could be skatable. Could that be skatable or not? And so this idea of like thinking like, well, we're going to do a joint project rather than having the city say to us, here's a park, you go skate over here. We're saying, let's do this in a central space, but this also means you have to be like a good community member. And that means you have to share as well, So it does put the responsibility on skaters in a way that I think skaters are embraced and want to have and say like, hey, I know what I'm doing and I can avoid hitting you because I know what I'm doing, And so, but they need the right to prove that.
Yeah. So it's an experiment in sociology too.
Absolutely. And honestly, that's kind of why we want to start it as a lab here.
Yeah.
To kind of figure it out and do research to then scale it.
All right. Well, lastly, what do you hope readers take away from your book, Rezballers and Skate Elders?
I think I had already mentioned the importance of understanding the joy that's in these communities and not ignoring the extreme damage of settler colonialism, but also not thinking of these places in terms of sort of desolation only. And I think in connection to that, part of the idea of seeing these places as desolation is coding Native places as places of the past. That's one of the main projects of settler colonialism, is to suggest that Native people are not people of the present or the future, but people of the past only, right? And that eliminates hope and sort of joy that comes with it. And by talking about the way that these people are participating in like a fully modern activity of skateboarding and basketball, I think I want people to get a sense that Native people are people of modernity too, and they are kind of co-creators in modernity and therefore people of the present and the future as well.
I've been speaking with David Camper. He's a professor of American Indian Studies and Associate Director of the Center for Skateboarding, Action Sports, and Social Change at San Diego State University. His new book is called Rezballers and Skate Elders, Joyful Futures in Indian Country. Professor Camper, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
That's our show for today. I'm your host, Jade Hindman. Thanks for tuning in to Midday Edition. Be sure to have a great day on purpose, everyone.
Now on The Finest, the story of three friends who grew up in Southeast San Diego during an era of rising crime and aggressive policing. In graffiti, they found an alternative to gang life, but in their case, staying out of trouble landed them in it.
I open it up and it's the police, and I'm like, oh. And on their way out, they turn around, they're like, oh yeah, we also got a warrant for your arrest.
Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.